All right, since you all enjoyed the last chat and actually a lot of good conversation came out of it, let's have another one. Today, I want to talk about how I think while AI, there are some very problematic things about AI, and there are some benefits for artists on AI, but I think there's a problem that has existed longer than AI, and that is actually more of a threat than AI. So let's break it down. Like, what are people afraid of about AI? First of all, exploitation of artists is real. Like there's for-profit companies using the work of other artists to train their AI models to then produce art in the style of that art that it was trained on. So you can have an artist that trained their whole life to make a certain style of illustration or make a certain kind of music, and their livelihood is based around making that art. And then suddenly a machine unlawfully, illegally, I would say, was trained on their work and then kind of regurgitates a version of that work. So that's obviously very exploitative and very bad. But then there's AI tools that are helpful, like for music producers, like easy mixing and mastering tools, for photo editors, certain things in Photoshop where you can extend a background or easily remove something. It's like tools that can actually help artists. So there's no doubt that there are helpful parts about it too. But more dangerous than AI, we have to talk about, again, these algorithmic platforms that we're all on. So we all know that there's no more blogs, really. There's no more websites, like individual artist websites. Maybe there could be, again, one day, but we all go to these big platforms every day and we check. And that's kind of how we consume our artists or keep up with them on a daily basis. We go to YouTube, or we go to Instagram, or we go to TikTok, and we check in on what everybody is doing. And if you are an artist out there, you've most likely used these platforms to share your work. The problem with these platforms is there's not a lot, first, for I think for many people, there's not a lot of intention when you go to these platforms. You go to them and there's a feed that just shows you what it thinks you want to see or what it thinks is important, instead of you being like, oh, what's going on with this artist I love? Let me go to their page. I think that's a minority of the behavior on these apps. And what dictates that, of course, it's an algorithm. And what is that algorithm usually driven by? A lot of the times it's driven by how long that content keeps you on the platform. So if something could potentially bring you away from Instagram, like if there's a link in somebody's story, it's probably not going to show that story to a lot of people. But if a platform wants to push long form video, that I think like TikTok is doing that now, they want to push longer form videos, well, they'll show you more of those. And if those videos keep the users on the platform longer, then they will show that content to more people. Of course, why do they want to keep you on the platforms longer? Because that's more of a chance that you'll see an ad, which is the business behind these platforms for the most part. It's like an ad-driven platform. The more impressions that are viewed on an ad, the more these platforms can get paid, or the more that they can sell the ad space for. Think of it as like a billboard on a major highway. Obviously, that billboard space is going to cost more than a billboard on a small town road that doesn't get much traffic. And that ads business has existed for a long time, of course. But if we understand the rules of the algorithm, we can cheat the algorithm, right? Like if we want to keep people watching, we can now edit our stuff for retention. Or if a certain type of content seems to be doing well, we can just keep repeating and doing that content over and over again, right? We can game the algorithm in a way. Here's where the danger starts to creep in. I think everybody is aware of probably the biggest creator on YouTube, Mr. Beast. The reason that Mr. Beast is one of the biggest, if not the biggest creator on YouTube is because he has completely figured out how to game this algorithm, this machine, this sort of ethereal thing that dictates what content gets served to you or gets served to the most people. And if you watch any interview with Mr. Beast, most of them he talks about the same things. He talks about how diligently he examined what content performed the best on YouTube. He did everything from examine the thumbnails, testing thumbnails on his own channel, testing different editing styles, so making micro edits. If we edit this part 7 seconds shorter, does it get people to this part faster? Like a really scientific approach to YouTube. And one of the problems with this is the way he talks about it. He says, well, I want to make the best YouTube video possible. That's basically what he says. Oh, it's all in service of making the best video. And I can't help but thinking that that is just so off base of a way of talking about it. He's making the best YouTube video in terms of how long he can sort of hypnotize people into watching. I don't know that he's thinking at all about, can I move people with this video? Can I express a creative idea with this video? Does this video create some kind of emotional connection or help the viewer in some way, maybe educational wise? It's like purely retention-based entertainment, which I don't think there's anything necessarily fundamentally wrong with. But what happens is, it's how he describes it. That's the best video. And on a platform like YouTube, once he's figured out how to game the algorithm, and he goes on to talk about it as making the best video, everybody else learns the rules of the algorithm or learns how to potentially replicate that success by doing the same things, editing the thumbnails in the same way, editing the videos in the same way, all for the sake of clicks and retention, which the criteria for which Mr. Beast is defining the best video, that criteria was given to him by the algorithm, not by like his creative vision. It was given to him by the machine, telling him, oh, if you make the thumbnail like this, we'll show it to this many more people. If you edit in this style, this many more people will continue watching the video and will continue to share it to more people. So it's not like he came up with the criteria for what is the best YouTube video. He learned it from the algorithm. The algorithm trained him to make his videos a certain way. I guess it's not like I'm not making like a morality or ethical judgment on Mr. Beast for doing that, but I just want to acknowledge that he's not making the best video, which is a nebulous term. Like, think about it, what's the best movie you've seen? I don't think you would compare it to a Mr. Beast video. And it's just a matter of pointing out that what he's considering the best video and what the algorithm and what YouTube determines is the best YouTube video is determined by an algorithm, a machine. So it just makes me think, like, I can't help but wondering if like Steven Spielberg, when making his movies, if he had been like diligently editing for like YouTube retention rates, how different would our culture look? I don't know. Like the idea of the creators we used to look up to, like the video makers, the filmmakers that we used to look up to, if we talk about video specifically, but transfer this to any art. If like the film directors that made your favorite classic movie, what if they grew up looking up to Mr. Beast? How would your favorite movie still exist? And how about your favorite musician, right? Like if they came up thinking about like, oh, I gotta make this content rather than I gotta make this awesome record, would your favorite record exist? So it's almost like the algorithm has started training the humans. And I think that is a little bit too dangerous. And I've fallen victim to this too. Like here on YouTube, In the early days of this channel, I knew that if I, let's see, where can I find one? If I held up two MIDI controllers, two small keyboards, if I did a thumbnail like this and I compared two MIDI controllers, I could get a lot of views. So I do a video where I'm trying to provide some educational service and educate people about MIDI controllers. That video pops off. Then I do another one, and that video pops off again. And suddenly I'm down this rabbit hole of comparing MIDI controllers for years. And at one level, I feel like I was providing some type of, educational value to people. But at another level, I realized I was being trained to create that kind of video. I was being rewarded. YouTube would give me like fireworks on my screen or like confetti on the screen every time a video would do well. And it's like, oh, this kind of video does well. Keep making that. And then the audience was trained too. The audience was trained like, oh, I go to TAETRO to learn about MIDI controllers, and that's it. And if I keep watching videos about MIDI controllers, maybe I'll eventually make music or be able to buy the right one. And the detriment of that was I just saw people that had lost the plot completely, lost the end goal of like making music, and were just like down this permanent rabbit hole of product comparison. And I'm sure that's probably relatable across any niche, whether it's like purely tech with like this laptop or that laptop, or I don't know. I'm sure it transfers across different types of art. Painting, this paintbrush versus this paintbrush, this paper versus this paper. It's like there's a ceiling to how much that level of content can be educational and valuable for the viewer, and then how much it's actually becoming like a replacement, a form of procrastination for the viewer. Because you can feel real good watching videos like that, like, oh, I'm getting educated about the thing that I'm going to buy so I can make my art. And then that can eventually replace the time making the art. But it still flips a switch in your brain and fools you into thinking you're being productive. So I was being trained to create a certain type of content. The viewer was being trained to continue watching a certain type of content, and none of us were really benefiting from that. So it's easy to fall into that trap, I think, of being, trained by an algorithm. And you pay attention to the artists that you follow or that you discover on any of these social platforms. You might realize that you followed them for a certain thing, and maybe it's a certain video style, a certain content style, and then they just keep repeating that over and over again. They find what works. We find what works, and then we just repeat it over and over and over again. How could you possibly have a long career in art by doing that? Like, we're people, we grow as people, we grow as artists, our vision changes, our values change over time. There's no way that we could stay happy as artists doing the same thing over and over and over again, like the algorithm wants to train us to do. So I make this comparison to AI because people act so worried about AI, and there's real reason to be worried about AI and its exploitation of artists. But I'm not really worried about it from a replacing artist's perspective, because I think there's something much more dangerous than that. And it is what we just talked about. People are worried about machines creating art that humans will like. So the machines replacing the artists, essentially. People are worried about machines creating art that people will like. I am much more worried about humans creating art that machines like. Let me know what you think in the comments down below.